Hello and welcome to today's ACMP member webinar. Our topic today is understanding your response to change. Because all too often when change happens, people react to it. When instead of reacting, what we need to do is understand our response. Hi, everybody. My name is Dustin Jackson. I'm on the ACMP Global Board of Directors, and it's my honor to be here to be the moderator for this session today. First, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, MHS. MHS, whose support made this possible. Thank you again, MHS, for being a sponsor and for going beyond just assessments. Thank you. Hey, we have exciting news. Our upcoming virtual event, Change Management Global Connect, is coming up soon and will be taking place on July 22nd to the 24th in 2025. Registration is open, so take your time and register today. And also, while we're doing these webinars, if you enjoy these valuable insights and this engaging content, we encourage you to take the next step in this process and join the ACMP. Because as a member, you'll gain access to even more fantastic and informative content, exclusive resources, networking opportunities, and a supportive global community of change management professionals. Hey, don't miss out. Become a part of the ACMP today and elevate your change journey. And here at the ACMP, we have what's called the CCMP. It's a globally recognized credential. It's the best way for OCM professionals to prove their expertise, knowledge, and investment in their ongoing professional development. It shows their commitment to the ethical and professional requirements of our industry, but it also increases your marketability as an OCM expert. For me, there's a lot of value in the fact that it advances your professional credibility in this field because it does require certain requirements for you to be able to achieve it. It expands your credibility, whether you're internal or external to an organization. It assists in your competitive recruitment and retention and helps standardize practices you use internally within your organization for effectiveness and consistency. So if you don't have your CCMP yet, consider it. And also at the ACMP, we're coming out with more credentials in the future. Be on the watch for that. One of the most valuable member benefits is our ACMP resource library, where this session that we're in right now will become a part of within the next 48 hours after this is done. In the resource library, you can access 10 years worth of members only tools, webinars, conferences, presentations, and white papers. A lot of great value in there for you to be able to go access. And it's consistently ranked as one of our top member benefits. So make sure you are taking advantage of it. Our next member webinar will be held on June 24th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. This topic is going to be building resilience in times of transformation, a great topic that we all need to understand. So be sure to be registered for the event. It's at the event calendar at the acmpglobal.org and discover other educational opportunities that might interest you. Because as the ACMP, we're always trying to provide some level of additional education to help us all out as a community. Hey, before we get started on the webinar today, just a few housekeeping items. First of all, today's webinar will be recorded and made available in the resource library that I just talked about within 48 hours. All audio lines have been muted for this webinar, and today's webinar will run until 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That might be a wrong. If you have any questions during the presentation, post it in the Q&A. I'll be checking the Q&A. Make sure the questions go into the Q&A, not the webinar chat, please. And then any questions for the presenter will be answered during and after the presentation. So be sure to join the conversation and in the prompts in the speaker chat. Thank you. And now it's my great honor and distinction to introduce to you my new impressive best friend. This is Hayley Hesseln. She is the co-founder of EI Advantage, where she does the curriculum development and delivery. She's also an economist and a professor at the University of Saskatchewan. In addition, Hayley's a master trainer of emotional intelligence for MHS. She's an alumnus of the Royal Roads University Executive Coaching Program in Victoria, BC, Canada, and a member of the International Coaching Federation. In addition, she's received her master teaching designation from the University of Saskatchewan in 2017. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the most impressive person alive. In addition to being an orphan raccoon mom, she is a recipient of the Medal of Bravery from the Governor of General of Canada in 2018, where she saved a real life. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most impressive persons I've met, and I'm excited to introduce to you as your new friend, ladies and gentlemen, Hayley.
Well, thank you, Dustin, for that stellar introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm absolutely thrilled to talk about managing change and understanding your response to change. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to ask questions as we go through the presentation, because I think asking questions in the Q&A and getting answers as we go will be more engaging, and I'll be able to answer them as we go. So I'm going to start with a poll. How do you feel about change? And I've got three responses. You might fall in the middle somewhere, but I've got A, I hate it with every fiber of my being. B, it's acceptable within reason. And C, I love it. Let's just change everything for the sake of it. I can tell you that I tend to fall into the C category, and I know that sometimes that really doesn't work well when I'm teaching students. I'm a professor at the university, and they don't like change. Sometimes, however, people really don't like any change at all, and sometimes it's okay as long as you explain it. And so I'm asking this question because I want you to understand your own response to change. And then as we go through the presentation, we'll talk about different characteristics, how you feel about change, how you approach change in your life, and more importantly, how you can use emotional intelligence to moderate your feelings about change, to understand yourself a little bit better, and to understand others. And I think that is the key, understanding others when we're going through a period of change. So the results are in. I see about 81% suggest that it's acceptable within reason. We've only got 2% that hate it, and about 17%. And this is interesting because we do a change style indicator assessment, and the research shows that about 50% of people fall within that middle category and 25% on either side. So let's continue here. So I'm going to talk about change and the fact that change is constant. That's the only thing we can depend on. I'd like to challenge you to think about your own approach to change. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Does it matter what type of change? Is it change at work, bigger life changes? Is it smaller changes, change in your personal life? And then how do you embrace or change? How do you embrace change or resist it? And how do you feel about other people and their response to change? So let's get started. We're going to talk about preferences, where you might fit in a particular spectrum. I'm going to talk about different approaches you might take and different approaches to understanding others, and specifically how that is going to affect your ability to communicate with others and how others communicate with you. What's your preference for how people communicate change to you? And then we'll talk about specific emotional skills, subscales, that you can use and develop to help you deal with change in a better way. Even if you love change, it's about working with people who maybe don't like change so much. So how many are familiar with emotional intelligence? I'm guessing you've heard the term. It's been around for years, probably over 100 years now. It's been popularized in the last little while. You might have read books by Daniel Goleman. He's sort of the father of popularizing emotional intelligence. There's assessments you can take. MHS offers those assessments. So EI in general is a set of skills that we use to manage our lives better. It's different from IQ, which is set. EI can be honed and typically increases as we get older. So it's about how we perceive ourselves. What are the emotions you're feeling? What are the triggers? What are they doing to help you get through life? How do you express those emotions in a way that develops mutually beneficial relationships based on openness, honesty, trust? And then how does that help you to make decisions in life? Are you making good decisions or poor decisions? How do you cope with challenges? And how do you become resilient, which I believe is the topic of your next webinar. So overall, the research shows that EI is a very good predictor of success in life and work, all things considered. Of course, you have to have the skills to do the work you do, but EI will help you do those skills better. This is the model that I'm going to be speaking to as I weave bits and pieces of it through today's webinar talking about change. You can see the 5 different composites, and I would like to focus, I'm going to draw some out. First of all, self-awareness, which is your ability to understand your emotions and your triggers. That falls in self-perception. Reality testing falls in decision making. So, to what extent are you being objective? Can you be more objective in asking questions and working with people as you go through change? Being flexible is about emotional flexibility. This is about your ability to adapt, take on new information, change your mind, listen to other people, have different perspectives. If you can develop these types of skills going through a period of change, you will better be able to handle change yourself and embrace it, as well as work better with other people to achieve more productive change more efficiently. And the last one I want to draw out is optimism. Optimism isn't just about looking forward to the future, it's about realistic optimism. It's knowing that if things are difficult, a period of change is difficult, that you can work through that and you will be able to look forward to new and better things. So it's having that less pessimistic, more realistic, and optimistic about the future. So those are the 4 I'm going to talk about as we go through the webinar today. I love this quotation. The measure of intelligence is the ability to change. So this sort of speaks to emotional intelligence and certainly flexibility. We all face change in life. We get older, the seasons change, relationships change, our jobs change, our bosses change, we change where we live. So many of these things happen, and you really don't have a choice. You must adapt. If you don't adapt, change is going to be that much more difficult. So, being intelligent about change and embracing it and using your emotional skills to get through it can make you much more resilient and to provide you better opportunities as you go through change. So let me just ask a quick question. Maybe this is something you want to pop into the Q&A. Why is change a good thing? This is something that I hear in relationships all the time. People get together, one person thinks that they're going to stay the same, the other one expects change, and it turns out that nobody's happy. So, what about change? If you're going to focus on the good, what is good about change? What do you enjoy about change? Any comments in the Q&A? I can say for myself that I like change because I tend to learn things. Sometimes change is challenging, and sometimes it's scary. But when you come out the other end, you tend to be a stronger person. So I'll just give it a couple of seconds here to see if we've got any comments regarding what's good about change. I ask my students this sometimes, and they say absolutely nothing is good about change. So I wouldn't go with that. Okay.
Hayley, we're getting some great answers here,
All
anywhere between
right.
making progress, to keeping things fresh and interesting, makes us open to more things. It provides us growth. It's an evolution, and learning new perspectives is rewarding. A lot of great responses here.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that people can embrace change and see the good in it. In my class, I play a lobster video, and it's about a lobster growing. And the only way a lobster can grow is to feel discomfort because they grow into their shell. The shell gets too tight. They need to move under a rock, get rid of the shell, and then they come out bigger, stronger. And the same thing happens over and over. So basically, you cannot have that growth without change and sometimes a little bit of discomfort. So it's a great analogy. So if I were to ask you the opposite question, what doesn't change? And the answer is pretty much nothing. Jobs, bosses, we live in a time of such rapid change. Every day I'm downloading new software and updates. Our experiences change. I think we're exposed to so many different cultures because we are really a global community. The economy is changing quite rapidly right now. Our perspectives change as we learn and grow. Knowledge, in my case, I'm getting gray hair and new wrinkles. That's changing. I really have, I must embrace this. I don't know what else I can do. Friends, family change, seasons. So when we think about change, it is all around us and it is pervasive. It just never stops. So, with putting that into context, we can look at how individuals respond to change. And there's a spectrum, like there is for pretty much everything. Before I get into that, I want to talk about emotional intelligence and how we can use awareness, self-awareness, or emotional self-awareness, which is part of the model, to understand our perceptions around change. And awareness is about our ability to understand what our emotions are, what we're feeling, and why we're feeling them. What are our triggers? And you might be very highly self aware. You know every nuanced emotion you're feeling. You know why you're feeling those emotions. And you're using that emotional information to manage yourself. I know lots of people who aren't that emotionally aware. And when I ask them how they're feeling, they say good or bad. And sometimes they're not sure, they just shrug. And the idea of awareness is if you can name your emotion and you can understand what the triggers are, then you can manage different situations in a way that's more expedient and possibly more efficient to a better end. So, for example, let's take, I'll use anger. Um, if you're angry, you might need to do something about something. What are you angry about? Well, can we distill this down a little bit? I can say, well, maybe you're in a situation of disgust. Maybe you're feeling disgusted by something. So this means something has happened and you're having a reaction to that. Can we take that one step further? Contempt or revolted. Um, these specific emotions will allow you to identify the cause of the emotion, the trigger, such that you can manage that emotion better and do something to solve the problem or to regulate your emotions. With my students, for example, they will come to me and say that they're frustrated, or I know it'll be a negative emotion. And so if I ask them enough questions, I find out they're frustrated. And that might lead to a solution that requires them to study more. It might lead to a solution that I need to provide more information. And you wouldn't know that if you just knew the person was feeling bad. So this is something called the feelings wheel. I use it with students, with clients, sometimes with myself. This is downloadable. You can find it anywhere on the internet. But being aware of your emotions is really important, particularly when you're going through a time of change. And it's not just awareness of your own emotions, so self-awareness, which I've just talked about. It's about acknowledging others. How are other people feeling? Are you noticing that maybe something is off? Somebody is not feeling well, they don't want to talk about things. Maybe they're withdrawn. They don't like change, too much information. And then overall, if you're going through change with an organization or a team, something broader, being aware of the culture. What is the culture of change? Is it to be open and honest? Is it to just make the changes, get through it as fast and painlessly as you can? Is it about shaping the norms? To what extent are you listening to each other and incorporating that information in the change process? So awareness can be very narrow regarding the self, or it can be very broad regarding the culture. So this is something that we use in our practice. It's change style preferences, and it has to do with how we communicate change, how we feel about change. And this is the spectrum. We go from right in the middle, pragmatist, meaning practical change. People accept change, and it's okay within reason. Ask questions. And then on the two ends of the spectrum, it's not appreciating change, very conservative, and the originator, which would be embracing change, loving change, blue sky thinking. So change style preferences here. If we look at the two ends, the conservers tend to be individuals who are very traditional. So this might be something that you also want to put in the, actually, I'm going to do a poll in a minute, so just hold off. So conservers are traditional. They tend to like slow evolutionary change, very incremental. Conservers like structure, they like rules, they like tradition, so not much change. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got people who challenge structure, expansive, blue sky thinkers, very contemporary, love change just for the sake of it, love to shake things up. And so in the middle, we tend to see people who are more practical. So these are the people who will moderate change. They will work together to be mediators between the two extreme groups. Pragmatists tend to be practical. They accept change. It depends on the situation. They will accept structure when appropriate, and they like change that's functional. Overall, in the population, you've got about 50% of people that fall in the middle, so from -9 to +9. And so I was interested to see that about 80% of this group fall in that particular category. Roughly, you've got 25% of people on either end of the spectrum. So what you might notice here is that if you are somebody who loves change, how are you dealing with people on the opposite end of the spectrum that like things in a way that's very slow and traditional? You might be required to fill in paperwork and be focused on very detailed aspects of a change if you're an originator, which you might find frustrating. People on the other end of the spectrum who are very traditional might be frustrated by the blue sky thinkers. They think, what are you doing? This isn't going to work. You're not paying attention to the details. So this is why it's important to understand different preferences, not only yourself, but others, so that you can better communicate and give people what they need. So digging a little bit into each of these types and their preferences. If you might fall on one end or you might be somewhere in the middle, it doesn't mean that you can't embrace all change, for example. So these are tendencies more than anything, and certainly we're flexible. So if you're a conserver, and maybe you'll give me some thumbs up if you are a conserver, you like deliberate change. You like to be very disciplined, organized. You like things that are very well defined. No surprises, no uncertainty. You don't want to come to work and find things all over the place. You like tradition, best practices. So you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it. It makes all the sense in the world, and everything is under control. So that would be the conserver characteristic. The originator at the opposite end of the spectrum sometimes appears unorganized and undisciplined. They're just doing things out of the blue. They're challenging the structure. They don't like rules and details. They love risk and uncertainty. Let's do things just for the sake of doing them. Maybe these people seem impractical, especially if you're looking at it from a different perspective. these are the people who are divergent thinkers. I see some little woohoos going up there. So we've got definitely got originators in the group. So you fall on one end of the spectrum or the other. Now for the pragmatists. The pragmatists are practical. They're agreeable, they're flexible, they can listen to both sides, they can appreciate both perspectives. They are typically mediators, they can bring people together, they can ask important questions that grounds a change in reality. They also, because they work so well with the different groups, they appear more team-oriented. They can work with both sides. They're great at being that coworker that's going to listen to both ends of the spectrum. Very functional, focused on getting things done and being very practical. So those are the three. You can fall anywhere on that spectrum and have different types of tendencies. And you also might change. If you're looking at change at work versus change at home, you might adopt different tendencies as well. So it's certainly not written in stone.
Haley, there's a few questions if you don't mind, real quick.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent.
Um, one of the questions is it possible for a person to have a blend of all three of these?
Yes, I think so. And it might depend on the situation and your propensity for risk and to what extent you like details and such. So I myself, when it comes to doing new things, traveling to new places without maps, not planning, I'm an originator all the way. I want to go to the far ends of the earth. Um, when I am managing, like you said, I have raccoons and I run a wildlife charity. Things need to be done in a certain way for health and safety reasons, and so I'm very much a conserver. For other things, I tend to be more pragmatist originator. So it depends on the situation. It depends on maybe this, how much skin you have in the game, what matters to you, your personal life, your professional life. So this is, we call it change style preference, where you might display tendencies at one end or the other or in the middle. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't have characteristics of all three.
Thank you. Also, generationally, as we talk about our different age groups, right? Are different age groups more propense towards one than the other?
It's a good question. I'm not sure, but if I give it some thought, um, I work with a lot of students. I teach a class of 300 students who are generally 18, 19 years old. They're in agriculture. They're coming off the farm for the first time, sometimes living alone. And I find that in the school system these days, they like to know all the dates for all the assignments. And if I change anything, if I suggest a small change, there is an overwhelming negative response to that. So I kind of wonder if that is maybe that's the demographic I'm teaching. Um, on the other hand, I work with a lot of professors at the university who are very much innovative. And so some of the younger ones tend to be more innovative, some of the older ones tend to be more conservative. Um, so yeah, that's a hard one. I think I'd have to look into the research to see if that was the case.
Do you know any information about maybe the informative years in your younger life really having an impact on your change style?
That might be the case. Yeah, I think I've been reading a lot about uncertainty and people's response to uncertainty. And so, if you grow up in an environment of a lot of uncertainty and you don't know what's going to happen next, maybe you're moving a lot, you might tend to be a little bit more conservative because you're worried about the future. If you grow up in a secure environment, from what I've read, you tend to be willing to take more risks. So that is certainly that's not definitive. That's just some of the research I've been reading right now on uncertainty and risk and sort of living with uncertainty and those types of things.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Good, you're welcome. Okay, so let's do another poll. Now that I've described conservative pragmatist originator, where would you see yourself on the change spectrum. And like we just talked about, you can fall one end or the other. You can change your preferences depending on the circumstances or situation. But overall, what would you say? Which one do you fall closest to? Um, like for me, example, I think I rate as a 26. So I tend to be more originator, but I can be practical as well. My business partner ranks a little bit less than me, so closer to central. And we find that we've got a very good relationship when it comes to dealing with change. She's more grounded and talks about, well, these are the specific steps we need to take. I'm not so interested in the details. I'm probably very frustrating to work with. I'm more about the ideas. Oh, we can do this, we can do that. But between the two of us, because we're open to these ideas, we are able to recognize each other's strengths and to make the best use of those strengths, even though we're different. All right. Okay, so the polls are in here. Pragmatists, 72%. So it's a little bit down from the last question I asked. We've got about 9% as conservers and 18% as originators. So this somewhat fits the bill in terms of the overall population dynamic. So very interesting to see. I'm guessing the pragmatists are the ones who can see both sides. You can bring people together, work with people. Originators tend to be more innovative. Conservers tend to keep things on the rails. And I have found that sometimes I'm frustrated working with the other types, but what we have to remember is perspective. What do each of these preference styles bring to the table? Because each type, and regardless of where you are on the spectrum, is valuable. It's something that we have to appreciate in each other. So that's about being aware of ourselves and others. Okay, so let's talk about communication in terms of change. Communicating with others, and you can give me the thumbs up if this is resonating with you. If you're communicating with somebody who is a pragmatist, you want to talk about things in terms of outcomes. We can accomplish these particular things for these reasons. If we do this, then we should expect this. There should be consequences, and understanding what those consequences are and what they're going to do for the business, for the people in the business, the outcomes overall. Pragmatists also like to be consulted. What are the recommendations? What have you got to say? How can you talk about different perspectives? So, talking about timelines, who should be involved in change, all these very practical steps. So, if you're a pragmatist, I'm guessing these are the types of things, or the research says these are the types of things you want to talk about. Now, if you are a pragmatist and you're talking to a conserver and they're being very detailed, as a pragmatist, you might say, I'm not really good with the details. Let's talk about outcomes, for example. So it's important to be aware of your own preferences and to communicate what your preferences are with other individuals. And that's the same for all three styles. Going to the conserver side, communicating with conservers, you need to understand that details matter. You want to make sure things work. This is, conservers like tradition and taking things slowly and doing things with purpose. So you don't need to be talking about the big blue sky stuff. You can ask a conserver, what is it that you need to know? By when? What would make you feel comfortable? What do you feel about the risks? How do you feel about the change? So you can focus much more closely on those finer sets of details with conservers. And if you are a conserver, you can tell people, I need the details. I need smaller amounts of information at these particular times during the change process. And it's important to be aware of what you need and what others need. And that can certainly make the change process a lot easier. If you're an originator, you like that blue sky thinking. what's going to happen? What's going to happen between now and the future in general? Um, Originators tend not to like details. They don't want to get bogged down in the process. They're about the big ideas, vast sweeping changes. They like to be innovative and those types of things. And what you might be noticing is that conservers tend to be people who are um, work in accounting, for example, tax planning, very detailed, orderly types of work. Originators tend to be the CEOs of the company or the entrepreneurs. They're the ones that create the ideas, and pragmatists are in the middle. So we also tend to be drawn to different positions based on our preferences for change and our preferences for communicating change. Okay, so this part is a little bit negative, but it's about expanding your perspective. We see people differently. We see people who are different from us with different preferences, sometimes negatively. And there's a lot of research on that as well, and it focuses on us and them. And us and them can be very different in terms of age, race, you name it, including change. So if you are an originator, you might be frustrated by all the paperwork you have to do and the bureaucracy and authority. And you might find that, when you're required to do these types of tasks, you're in the weeds and you're frustrated. Um, but where would we be without people who did not um, focus on the details and keep us? I keep saying this because I tend to go off the rails, but keep us on the rails. Make sure that we fill in the forms and do due diligence and work appropriately so that we are dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So you might see frustration. Conservers might see innovators as impulsive, crazy. You have these great ideas and you don't follow through and you don't understand that there is structure. We need to follow these certain rules to make this actually work. So there are important details. And so you can see both sides. There can be frustration. But where would we be without new ideas, new innovation, advancement? So the world needs all types of people. And what helps is for us to tap into our emotional intelligence to be able to work better together. Um, Pragmatists might be perceived as conservers, as in the middle. Maybe they're mediating, easily influenced. They can go both ways. Maybe they're a little bit too flexible, political, those types of things. So that's sort of the dark side of how we see each other. So let's talk about what you can do to develop your emotional skills to be able to embrace change, regardless of where you are on the spectrum. Flexibility is, from an emotional perspective, is about being adaptive, taking in new information, dealing with unpredictable events and dynamic circumstances. Um, it's about perspective. And this is something it's very difficult. If you are, you're in your lane, you see things the way you see them, you perform based on your values and beliefs and perceptions. And sometimes we just do not get out of our own way. And, you can become so married to an idea that you're not willing to listen to another person. However, if you can take a different perspective, if you can be emotionally flexible, you can learn. One of the assignments I use in my class is debate. And I purposefully set up two teams to debate with each other, and I give them a topic and I force them to debate on the side they don't want to debate. So I'm really not very popular as an instructor for a lot of the time. But the students who have to debate the opposite perspective will learn more. They realize that not everything is black and white. Not everything is good and bad. There are always two sides to a story. So if this is something that you can do in your business or with a team, you can force perspective and say, okay, we're gonna, look at pros and cons. This side who believes in this particular topic is going to argue against it. You guys argue for it. And so it takes the emotion out of it, even though we're talking about emotional intelligence, but it forces people to use the reality testing, see perspective, and adopt different opinions. And you'd be surprised at how much people learn and appreciate having the opportunity to be able to do that. So perspective is big. It's related to flexibility and the ability to listen to other people and perspectives. I mentioned reality testing. This is about being objective, asking questions around a situation, not just like mathematical objective questions, but testing the emotions of others as well. So, do you have all the facts? Are you listening to all the opinions? So, it's related to perspective. What role can you play in change? If you're somebody who doesn't like change, what can you do to get involved to guide that change? Ask the questions, be realistic about it, and don't overpromise and underdeliver or vice versa. Think about what are the positive outcomes? What are the negative outcomes? Talk about these things. Being objective can be difficult, especially if you're in an emotional state, if you're not on board with a particular change, or you're not communicating appropriately with your colleagues. So stop, be objective, take the emotion out of it, ask the questions, and that can help you to gain perspective as well. I should pause. Any questions up till now that I haven't answered?
Yeah, there's a question, Haley. Curious how this framework holds up with the mental health challenges or trauma where people may be less able to cope and respond well due to prior injuries, unhealthy situations, etc.
Yeah, that one's tough. When we're working with emotional intelligence, we often see um, some indicators that might show that there is a need not for a coach, an executive coach, but trauma counselor or such. So if somebody is having a very difficult time through change and it is not something that you can address through conversation, it might become clinical. What we recommend is that you seek counseling and to get professional help, somebody who is trained in that regard to help individuals through those particular situations. Yeah. Any other?
Fantastic. And just one more question. There was some conversation in the chat around possibly the cultural impact on this model and these three different profiles.
Yeah, the culture is interesting, especially when it comes to emotional intelligence. It turns out that there are six or seven facial expressions that are known worldwide, and the emotions that we feel have been identified in this model. There are 15. Um, they transcend age, race, gender, culture, background, everything. What you will see, though, is some cultures, for example, if we take emotional expression, are quieter. They defer more to maybe authority, individuals who are older, for example. Some cultures are more expressive. So you will see differences in how emotions play out and change preferences based on culture. But I think the metrics are pretty much the same. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Haley.
Good. You're welcome. Okay, so let's look at some benefits of the different styles. The conservers understand the details and the requirements for getting things done. The conservers tend to take better stock of the risks. They can look more detailed at what the uncertain areas might be, what those risks are. They can calculate those risks. They can evaluate what those costs might be around that. And so conservers tend to caution against haste. Let's take this one step at a time. Let's be thoughtful. And that, in a lot of cases, can make sure that going through a period of change is, you're taking stock of what might happen and reduce the risk of loss, for example. Originators, on the other hand, have the bigger ideas, they see the big picture, and push innovation. So making some changes sometimes is difficult, But being innovative can keep you ahead of the pack. It can lead to discovery. It can lead to new things, growth, and progress and efficiency. So we need both at each end of the spectrum, and we need pragmatists to provide the balance. Pragmatists tend to be very reflective. They're going to ask questions of both sides. They're curious. They can mediate. So they're very good in terms of interpersonal relationships and helping bring people together. And these are definite benefits that you would need going through any kind of change process. Another emotional skill that's really important is optimism. And optimism, according to the research, show that if you are an optimist, you tend to be healthier, you are longer lived, you're more productive. So all these kind of metrics that are important to an individual person's health as well as business related to optimism. Lots of research on optimism. Martin Seligman is a psychologist who started this trend in psychology that is titled positive psychology. Psychology is really has been historically a lot about what's wrong with us. And he asks the question, what's right with us? And how do we replicate that? And he's got a great book on optimism, and I think it's called Learned Optimism. So Martin P. Seligman, he talks about what optimism really means, and it's about how we deal with stuff. Do we take it personally? Can we be responsible for certain things? If something bad happens, you know that it's, people make mistakes and it's okay. So how do you deal with that? Perseverance, how much are you going to push to get through something? And pervasiveness, if something bad happens, does it mean your whole life is ruined? Not likely. So how we view events, how we manage events can be learned. You can be a more optimistic person. If you're optimistic about change, then you're likely going to go through that process in a more resilient and stress-free way. So optimists see failures typically as learning opportunities for growth. Setbacks might be temporary, but you're going to get through it. Optimists also help team members, help others accomplish their goals. I was working with an individual a couple of weeks ago who was very not optimistic, definitely pessimistic, just saw the world very negatively. And we talked about the importance of that. And he said, I have to be optimistic for my team. And he made the commitment then and there to be a different type of leader, because you can imagine if your boss or your leader or your partner is not optimistic about the future, what does that do to you? Does that give you hope? Does that encourage you to push through a period of change or a period of difficulty? Not likely. So we're back to self-awareness. How are you dealing with this change? How is that affecting other people? How is that affecting the culture of the organization you're in or your family? So optimism is really important when it comes to change. This comes from the Mayo Clinic, by the way. There's lots of information out there on being optimistic, how to learn to be optimistic, changing your viewpoint, seeing things from a more positive perspective. Okay, so managing change. How do you go about this? Heighten your emotional awareness. What are you feeling about this change? Can you identify the triggers? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling optimistic? Are you feeling cautious? How is, let me back up. Our thoughts give rise to emotions, which then give rise to behavior. And if your behavior is not helping you get through a period of change, you have to go back to change your thoughts to generate different emotions so that you can perform better and you can take care of yourself. So emotional awareness is really important in all aspects of life, but particularly through change, because change can cause a lot of anxiety and fear in some people. So the second part, test reality, ask questions. If change is often scary because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. if you can involve yourself in that process and ask the questions, be objective, test reality, check in with your emotions, your peers, your colleagues, your bosses, get involved and be proactive, you can guide that change to a certain extent, understanding that there are some things you control, and yet maybe there aren't. But to give you that little bit of purchase to be able to guide yourself and guide the change as well. The next one we talked about was flexibility. Flexibility is directly related to tolerance, resilience, stress management. Being flexible to new information, to learning, to growing, to changing your emotions, to seeing different perspectives can help you get through a process and manage your emotions more appropriately. If you're flexible to new ideas, you might be less afraid. You might be less risk averse when you have that information. And above all, optimism is about managing yourself personally, looking at the future, knowing that bad things are not going to happen forever, that you can get through things, and being optimistic will actually build your resilience for the next change, and it will help you to be physically healthier as well. Okay, so I hope I've got some time here for questions. And I'm happy to take any of your questions.
All right. There's a question in the chat. Change style indicators, second edition, CSI2, individual report. Would a change manager use this for their intake assessment to get a read on the audience receiving the change, or as an onboarding item for the new hires to be held and used by change management when implementing a change plan?
Yeah, I think, well, with any assessment, it's not the only thing you want to use, but I think it could be a good tool to gauge where an individual is, to what extent they are going to help manage change in the organization, having the conversation around that with that individual to make sure that this might be their preference, but they might be more flexible because we talked about this is a scale. So you might get a number for somebody, but there's more to it than that. So definitely using the assessment is a valuable piece of information, but I believe that you'd want to engage more deeply with that individual.
Perfect. Another question is, I've been thinking a lot about the response to change versus response to chaos. Things are changing, but it's extremely unclear what the change in the future state are.
Yes. Uh, yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Chaos. Chaos is interesting. I would if you and I were in a coaching conversation, I would ask you about the difference. What do you see as change? What does it mean to you? And how does that differ from chaos? What are the different risks involved? How does it make you feel? What are your emotions around dealing with change versus chaos? What can you control? In terms of control, we can really only control our response to certain things. How do you manage yourself through these chaotic times? Um, I think I would have to have a deeper conversation on that one.
Perfect. If anybody wants to put a question in chat or the Q&A. You're getting a lot of great messages telling you what a wonderful presentation is, Hayley, as we know. Yes, thank you so much.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I like this note right here. Wouldn't one of the differences be that change in our world has a planned outcome where chaos seems more random with no actual outcome in mind?
Yeah, that certainly could be the case. And so how do you manage yourself through that? Even with change, to what extent can you guide the outcome? With chaos, that might not be possible. It might be something you need to live through, and then the questions become, how do I manage myself in this process? What are my expectations? What am I going to do if this versus that? In a case of change, if you have some agency, what can you do to guide that change? Maybe that's not true for chaos. Maybe you can't sort things out. Might depend on the scale too.
Perfect. How likely or unlikely are these three different change styles likely to be optimists?
Um, I'm not sure I understand the question. So you're saying, yeah, go ahead.
What's the likelihood that any one of these three kind of profiles will be an optimist?
Okay. I would guess probably that the conserver would be least optimistic, and you might be more optimistic as you approach change. Um, yeah, I haven't thought of that. That's a great question. Um, yeah, if you are a conserver, you're very much engaged in the details. However, if the details are working out and change is going smoothly, you're getting the information as you need it, you might be optimistic about the change.
Fantastic. What about if you have any tips on bringing somebody from the dark side or total pessimism to more of an optimistic outlook?
Yes, you can change your outlook on things, and it requires a little bit of work. So, if you are a pessimist, you are likely going to use a lot of negative language. You're not going to see positives in the future. What I would do with that person is force them some way, maybe force is too strong of a word. I would encourage them to focus on what's going to happen that's good. And my mom in my life was highly, highly pessimistic. She said she was a realist. She was not. She was a pessimist. And so I would say to her every day, tell me one good thing that happened today. What about that made you happy? What did you enjoy about that? If you can force a perspective to get people to recognize that not everything is all bad, and you can do that over time, or with yourself, if you can journal, um, a proven way to focus on positive outcomes and optimism are to write down things that you're grateful for. Three things, maybe every day or once a week if once a day is too much, and go back and revisit those things. They need to be different. If you can do that and train yourself to see the positive, to focus on what's good in your life, that you can only have one thought in your head at a time. That will dampen the negativity. And over time, and it might take a while, over time, you will start to tend towards being more optimistic.
Thank you. I find that response fascinating. Thank you so much. Here's another great question on how often do you find that individuals are not always aware of their personal change style? And once they become aware of that change style, it changes their personal and professional work style and relationship to help them to their advantage.
Well, that's a great question. I think, it goes back to awareness, and awareness is key when it comes to emotional intelligence. A lot of people are not aware. They're not tuned into the emotions. They're focused on what is happening specifically. And when they become aware and they understand their preference, the preferences of others, and then they're able to communicate those preferences, it can help, it gives a structure and a framework and different perspectives and understanding of the people around us. And when you can level it up a notch by talking about what are the strengths of these different styles, what are they bringing to the table, you start to become more positive. You start to have sort of a recipe for this is how we need to talk to each other. This is how we need to navigate this particular change. So awareness is key. Great question.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we're running low on time. So I want to say thank you to everybody for participating in the ACM webinar today. And I would like to especially thank our friend Hayley for the wonderful presentation and insights on emotional intelligence. Immediately following the webinar, the survey will pop up. Please take a few moments of your valuable time to fill out the survey because it helps us shape our webinars for the future. And the conversation doesn't end here. Don't forget to join the webinar exchange community on ACMP Connect to continue the conversation and to engage with our speakers and fellow participants of webinars. This recording will be available within 48 business hours in the webinar section in the ACMP resource library. So make sure to go check this out, as well as a bunch of other great resources over there. If you already have your CCMP, remember that by attending this webinar, you're earning your PDUs towards maintaining your CCMP. So make sure you're recording your hours and get that logged in today. And from everybody at the ACMP and the Global Board of Directors, I just want to say thank you all for coming. It's been a great webinar. We love doing these things for you, and we can't wait for the next one. Make sure you register. We'll see you there.
Thank you, Dustin. I wanted to make a quick final comment that we will be emailing the slides and the recording to all attendees and all registrants, so be sure to be on the lookout. It should be sent out sometime this week, but if you do not receive it by end of day Friday, please be sure to send us an email. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.